Hey kids, anyone else love a good series about powerful women serving from beginning to end? Well, if you're looking for a new one to binge, look no further. Netflix's Sirens is out, and I watched it all in one go, and I gotta say, this is a good one. It's not perfect. The story could have some tweaks to make it better, but there's one thing the story does really well, and it's the vilification of women. Now, if you've been paying attention to my channel, we have talked about several aspects of the manosphere and how it manifests in real life, particularly in movies and TV series. And I think that this story is a great reimagining of the mythology of the Sirens, which, if you investigate deep enough, you'll realize that it's just another way for men to villainize women. The original Siren was a creature half woman, half bird. Then the lore of the Siren kind of became intertwined with mermaids who hypnotize seamen through song, and once again you have the female creature manipulating the man, driving him to do things you wouldn't normally do. Somehow, when men do bad things, you can almost always shift the blame to the woman. And it was written by a woman, so you know it's gonna be good. As I said, the series isn't perfect, but one thing they did right was the castings. We got Michaela, played by Julianne Moore. She is the woman that everyone is influenced by. She holds the most power in the series of the female characters. She's the role model that Simone aspires to be. She has the perfect life, but she only got this life because she married a billionaire, Peter, played by Kevin Bacon, who, spoiler alert, is the real villain of the series. And then we got Simone. Simone is Michaela's assistant, and people call her Mini Michaela because she is slowly morphing into a walking photocopy of Michaela. And then we've got Devon, probably the antithesis of Michaela and Simone. She is from the real world, and she has real world problems, like a father who's been diagnosed with early onset dementia, a minimum wage job that is barely enough to care for her father, let alone to have a life of her own. And each women, I think, represent in a way a different allure to men. Michaela just has this seduction power and influence over others. We see that with several people that work on the island, but not directly for Michaela, have a very positive opinion about her. And the people that work directly for her fear her to the point where they refuse to even gossip about her when she's not around. She has that much of an ominous presence. And because of that, she's very alluring to other women who perhaps don't have her lifestyle. For example, Simone sees in her what Simone wants to be when she grows up. She is the leader of a wildlife rescue organization. She dedicates her life to philanthropy. She has a handsome, very successful husband. Michaela is Simone's dream of who do I want to be when I grow up. And she's also a role model for the women in these islands, as we see with the trio Chloe, Lisa, and Astrid. Three women that Michaela basically made over and gave the confidence to be strong, confident women that will ultimately attract successful men. She has a commanding presence, and at times it's almost unclear whether or not she's an actual mermaid that can literally hypnotize you with her voice. In fact, she has a scene with Devon where Devon just starts opening up about deep-rooted trauma 2 minutes into a conversation with Michaela, almost as if she has this supernatural power to soothe you and relax you and make you open up about your past experiences. And then bops her on the nose, and suddenly she's in a car on her way shopping. Michaela's way of love bombing you and showing you that with some help, you too can become a woman that will ultimately seduce a rich man to give you the lifestyle that you want. And so this energy that these women on the island have created is not so much the woman that is going to try and steal someone's husband. It's the woman that will make the man go to the woman. Simone's allure, on the other hand, is the diametric opposite age-wise. Does that even make sense? Simone is a lot younger, therefore more fertile. She's a young woman who also looks very young. She is sort of naive. She wears her emotions more on her sleeve. She's assertive like Michaela in a non-threatening way for the men around her. And so for older men, she becomes this almost trophy, this young woman that you'll seduce with all of your power and wealth, but also the incubator for all of your future babies. And as crass as that sounds, that is ultimately what shifts the power balance between Michaela and Simone. And then Devon's allure is more the poor man's allure. And I say this because Michaela and Simone fit into a certain lifestyle. If you're a rich man who lives in these circles of class and elegance and whatever, you're going to want to go for a woman like Michaela or Simone, women that are comfortable in that environment, that don't call out the bullshit. You're not going to go for a woman like Devon, who gets there and has no problem telling everyone how creepy this environment is and how much it resembles a cult. Devon's appeal is more physical to men who only want to get off. They're not really envisioning a future for them. They're more envisioning a night of pleasure. And she takes advantage of that. The first day that she travels to this island, she has sex with the guy on the ferry, and then the gardener, and then a captain of a boat. I support Devon's decisions to do it with whoever she wants. I am Devon in real life. So in the story, Devon is trying to rescue her sister Simone from the claws of Michaela because she feels like Michaela has brainwashed Simone into being a person she's not. She also wants Simone to come back and help her with their father. And as these dynamics unravel, as the story progresses, we start realizing that ultimately this story is all about self-preservation. However, that self-preservation is very quickly twisted and used in vilifying women. And I think that's what the show does really well, is the vilification of women. Obviously, the more villainized character is Michaela, the matriarch, the one that has the power from the beginning, the one that everyone fears. However, I liked how the series was able to villainize every single one of these women at one point or another, and how all of those instances are more so projections of how other people feel about their own actions. So they're turned into the villains of other people's stories as a projection, an avoidance of responsibility, mostly by the men in their lives. Let's start with Devon, the carefree girl who doesn't actually have any power in this story, financially speaking. She's only there to try and rescue her sister from the claws of the evil Michaela. Devon is the villain in several people's stories. She's the villain in her boss's life, the boss whom she sleeps with every so often, the boss who is married, the boss who blames her for dragging him to this island with their father at one point in the series, completely ignoring that he's the one who's married, he's the one who's cheating on his wife, but also no one ever asked him to bring their father to that island. He's a grown man who decided to bring him only to then turn around and blame Devon for it. She's a villain in Simone's life, her own sister, because at one point in their past, she did leave for college, leaving Simone at home alone with her father, and then got put into the foster care system and got abused. But she's now also the villain in Simone's story in the present time because she's the one trying to snatch her away from this seemingly perfect life that Simone has managed to build for herself, despite all of the circumstances of her past, despite the enormous amounts of trauma that she still has not come to terms with. And this completely disregards the fact that Devon had to put her entire life on pause so Simone could have a life. Devon was also a victim in their childhoods, yet she's the one who's had to have the responsibility to help Simone and to abdicate of her own interests and her own happiness so that her sister could thrive. And now she's at a breaking point where she's literally crying for help. She eventually admits that she needs her sister. She needs someone in her life because she's stuck helping their abusive, neglective father. Then we got Simone. Simone, who's dating this old creep called Ethan. Ethan sees her as this young temptation, this woman that fits the type he usually dates, the woman that goes to the island to work for the summer and then he dumps them at the end of the summer. But Simone is different. Simone has the longevity potential that Michaela has. They can see Simone becoming a Michaela in a few years, this powerful woman who's in charge and knows what she wants. But right now, she's also primed to have babies, so she could be a mother, a matriarch. And he turns Simone into a villain in his own story when she rejects his wedding proposal. How could she have done this? How could this woman with virtually no power in the island have seduced this billionaire and then broken his heart? He calls her a monster, says some really awful shit to her to completely avoid any responsibility he had in this story, but also completely disregarding the fact that he didn't like her for who she was. He barely knew her. He barely knew anything about her past before her sister arrived to the island. And the little he knew about her past, he completely disregards, ignores, and brings her father to the island at one point, thinking that that's going to be a romantic gesture, completely ignoring the several times that Simone explained how the topic of her past was really painful to even talk about, let alone face out of nowhere. So he shifts the responsibility of being a bad boyfriend that doesn't actually love his girlfriend for who she is, but for who she could be in his life, and turns her into a villain because He feels entitled to her affection and to her attention. For after all this time of stringing him along, how dare you not give me what I think I'm owed? Ugh. But Simone is also a villain in the staff's lives. You know, she's the mouthpiece for Michaela. She's mean, she's bossy, and they're all super happy when she's fired. And yet this also completely ignores the fact that Simone is only doing what Michaela asks her to do. She's only following orders. Her being bossy is her under the same pressure they have to deliver to their boss. She's wanting to impress Michaela. And so perhaps she takes her role a little too far. Perhaps she is more bossy than she should be. But once again, she's the ultimate villain in all of these people's lives just because she has some power over them. And then, of course, she ultimately becomes a villain to Michaela in Michaela's life. Once Michaela's husband takes an interest in Simone, she is the threat to everything that Michaela has built so far. She's literally the replacement that up until this point she was mentoring, nurturing, loving like a mother would love her daughter, completely ignoring the very complex dynamics in which Simone has found herself in. Michaela's husband, Peter, is throwing himself at her. Without this job, she has to be stuck with her abusive father taking care of him. And as much as she tries to explain to her boss that she has no interest in her husband, it's not really up to Simone because she doesn't have any power, nor does Michaela. The power all lies with Peter, the husband. But before we get into him, then we have the vilification of Michaela. She's the ultimate villain in everyone's story. First, to her staff, she's the one with the most control. At several times, we see the chef making her a smoothie, and every morning she says, "Not today," even though the making of the smoothie seems to be one of the most important parts of the morning ritual. But at no point do we see Michaela being outwardly villainous against any of her staff members. Sure, we give her some quirks like banning carbs over the weekend for everyone or not allowing anyone to smoke in any of the premises, but that could also be attributed to someone who wants to keep a picture-perfect environment for a very important weekend that will be publicized for the whole world to see. This could also be attributed to someone who's just genuinely creating the picture-perfect environment for the photo shoot that they have that weekend for Vanity Fair. She's also a villain in Devon's life because she's the figure that is stealing her sister away. She is the evil woman that is brainwashing Simone into becoming someone that she isn't. She's a villain to the people that live on the island because there are rumors circulating that she had Peter's ex-wife killed so she could take her spot. And probably more damaging than anything, she is the villain in her own husband's life for a really stupid reason that I hate, but is also very common. Peter has 2 kids with his ex-wife. They're grown up now, and he hasn't had a relationship with them for the better part of his marriage to Michaela. And he vehemently blames Michaela for not having a relationship with his kids. He says that because she hates them, she basically forbid him from ever seeing them. Forbade. It's forbade, not forbid. But she's also been unable to give Peter babies. Completely disregarding the fact that if you decide not to see your kids because your wife isn't approving of you having a relationship with them, then what we're doing is we're staying with a woman who you claim forbid you from seeing your kids, and you're okay with staying with someone like that. But you're also blaming her for how unhappy you are that you weren't there when your grandson was born, and now you want to build a relationship with them. You're finally hit your breaking point where you can no longer tolerate a life without a relationship with your kids, completely ignoring the fact that you're a grown man. You could have kept a relationship with them. You could have kept that up. It was you avoiding the awkwardness that would be having your kids and your new wife in the same room. Perhaps they're not best of friends, but I'm sure that they could have been polite. And if they couldn't be polite, then maybe you should have reassessed the relationship you have with them, specifically your wife. But you never did that because she was never the problem. She was never to blame. You used your wife as a succubus, as an incubator for all of the bad shit you did, for you being a neglective father, and decided that your wife was mean because of that. But also, holding it against your wife that she hasn't been able to give you kids is gross, right? Because she can't control her fucking body. She can't control her biological clock or her body's ability to give you offspring. It also has hints of Elon Musk. You know how he's been having baby after baby after baby in this like grand plan to populate the world with mini Elons because he thinks that he's the biggest genius that ever lived. It has connotations of that, Peter's obsession with having kids, but then you look at the ones that he already has and he didn't even bother to have a relationship with any of them. And somehow you blame your wife's body for not being able to give you another one. And this brings me to the culture of vilifying women usually obfuscates the real villains, the men. Let's start with Bruce, Simone and Devon's father. He's the alcoholic. And he was a villain in every woman's life that he's ever come into contact with. His wife was clinically depressed. She needed support, and instead he chose the bottle. Not to say that alcoholics choose to be alcoholics, but you also can't excuse all of the trauma he inflicted on everyone around him just because of an unaddressed illness. He neglected his family to the point where his depressive wife got into a car, put Simone in the back seat when Simone was 7, connected the exhaust pipe to the window with a tube, and tried to take her own life and her daughter's life. Luckily, Devon rescued Simone from the back seat in time for her to be taken to the hospital and make a full recovery. The mother, however, passed away. And now that he's got early onset dementia, after heavily neglecting both of his daughters his entire life, his daughters are stuck with him. Simone and Devon are stuck with this man who was essentially the cause of all of their trauma. And it's almost like there's this pressure on them to help the father just because he's the father. But as Simone says, he never acted like a father towards her. So why should she now force herself to be his daughter? Why can't they just put him in a care home to be treated for by others? Because that's what happens sometimes when you're a really shitty parent. You're not owed your kids' attention when you're older. And Bruce, in a moment of lucidity, even apologizes to his daughter. But at this point, an apology is just not going to cut it. An apology is not going to erase years and years of neglect and abuse. And an apology should not absolve you of everything that you've done. But it's also difficult for him at this stage in his life to take accountability for his actions. It's impossible to ever balance the scales. So we have this man who basically ruined his daughter's lives, and now they have to deal with the consequences of that. Then you got Ethan. Ethan, the old rich dude. I think he's from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and I think he had some work done. Ethan's a creep. The end. Ethan's a little creepy. He dates girls that come to this island for the summer to work, and then he dumps them or ghosts them even, which is even worse, towards the end of the summer when he knows that they're about to leave. But Simone is different. He is wooed by Simone's, I guess, long-term potential in building a family, being his wife. Simone is someone he can see himself with in the future because by the time he's old and decrepit, she's still going to be young and beautiful. And though at first they're taking things more and more seriously, and he even confesses to being in love with her, ultimately we realize he's not in love with her. He's in love with the idea of her and how she fits in his life, because she tells him several times that her past is traumatic, that she does not want to talk about it. And what does he do? He goes and fetches her father, showing a complete misunderstanding of who she is as a person and proving that he doesn't love her for her. He loves the idea of her in his life. So when he turns her into the monster in his life because she rejected his wedding proposal, he fails to acknowledge his own shortcomings and how he got himself in this position, how he's the one who's been seducing woman after woman in their early 20s like a fucking creep and then ghosting all of them. And as soon as one of them doesn't show long-term interest, she's a fucking monster who is evil at her core. That's small dick energy. Also blaming her for seducing him as if she has this hypnotizing power to make him completely forget that he's the rich one. He's the one with the house and the lavish lifestyle that is appealing to other people. He's the one with power in the dynamics of their relationship. Yet when it all ends, it was her. She was the manipulative one with all the power. And then we have Peter, perhaps the biggest villain of all, but also framed as the good guy of the story. Every interaction that Peter has with people, he's just very nonchalant, carefree. You know, he just wants to smoke a spliff and kick it with buddies. If Michaela is soft and calm in an intimidating way, Peter is soft and calm in a chill way. And even though Peter has a lot more power than Michaela, because Michaela's power ends where Peter says it ends, and Peter's power is endless because he's a billionaire, and billionaires should burn in fucking hell. People don't fear him as much as they do Michaela because Michaela actually does the work. Michaela has built this wildlife rescue organization from the ground up using his money, sure, his resources, but she's the one that put the hard work behind it. She's the one that created the space and the messaging behind it. She's the one that hosts all of these events and deals with PR. Michaela did all the work, and Peter's name is on it because he's got the money. So she's villainized in the sense that she's more upfront with her involvement. And Peter is the biggest because he blames his wife for not having a relationship with his kids, once again failing to take accountability for his actions as a grown man with more money than sense. If you miss your kids that much, you could have just picked up the phone or traveled to them and apologized like a big boy. Apologize for your shortcomings as a man, as a father, as a grandfather. Apologize for your inability to stick up for yourself, which you may have not even had to do because Michaela never forbade you from seeing your kids. He blames his wife for his own failures so he can absolve himself of the guilt, of the responsibility, of accepting the fact that maybe you're just a bad person. And his inability to accept any consequences of his actions drives him to look for this like love and appreciation that Michaela is no longer giving him. You know, Michaela is no longer attending to his ego 24/7. Michaela is no longer existing as an extension of himself. Michaela is doing more with your money than you were. Michaela is actually helping people. Michaela is actually impacting the world positively. But Michaela also had to deal with Peter for 13 years, and that creates calluses in people, you know? Being married to someone isn't easy, and your relationship will change naturally with the passing of years. So Peter becomes discontent with how, I guess, Michaela treats him, and he sees in Simone this younger model, the replacement, that doesn't nag him. She's still pretty. She's still young, so she'll probably be able to give you kids, more kids for you to ignore, I guess. And in this absolutely narcissistic quest to leave a positive legacy in the world and to make it about himself, he divorces Michaela without even blinking an eye and immediately puts Simone at the head of this organization that Michaela spent the better part of a decade building. He takes everything from Michaela in one instant and gives it to Simone. Because this story, the only people with power are the men, namely Peter. He's the one that holds all the cards. He's the true puppet master behind the scenes. And even though Simone accepts this proposal and she stays with Peter, who was her boss's husband, she's not the monster here either. First of all, Simone didn't chase after Peter. Peter took an interest in Simone, chased her, and she simply allowed him to chase her further. Simone ultimately becomes Michaela in this story in the way that Peter just can't resist her, can't resist the potential future he has with her. And this almost signifies the death of who Simone was, so much so that when her sister realizes that Simone has now stole her boss's husband, she has a tearful goodbye, almost accepting that her sister is now the same conniving monster she saw Michaela as. And as Michaela tells Devon on the ferry after she's kicked out of the island and robbed of her entire life, she tells Devon that Simone isn't a monster. And neither was Michaela. Because this entire time, they've been acting out of self-preservation. Michaela was a controlling wife because she feared if her husband started an affair, he would divorce her. And exactly this that happened would happen. She would literally lose everything because she was love-bombed by a billionaire into signing a very restrictive prenup back when they got married. So Michaela's entire life, entire body of work that she's built for years and years, all depend on her husband wanting to stay with her. She's trapped as much as Simone is trapped in this impossible choice of staying with her boss's husband because he now wants her, or going back home and live in poverty, taking care of the abusive father that never took care of her. They both have everything to lose, and they both feel trapped in their choices. And the heartbreaking thing is that there could have been a more peaceful resolution in this story where the man gets fucked. Finally, the prenup could have been annulled with evidence of infidelity. So Simone and Michaela could have joined forces, and Michaela could have used the photo of Peter kissing Simone as evidence for a prenup annulment, a divorce that would leave her with probably half of everything that Peter has. But instead of banding together, Michaela chooses to believe that her husband will want to stay with her once Simone is gone, and that leaves Simone with no choice but to welcome the advances of Peter in the hopes that he will sideline his wife instead. And so Simone takes the place of Michaela, much in the same way that Michaela took the place of the ex-wife, all because the man wants to trade in for a newer model and chase a more fertile womb, because that's ultimately what this is about. He married Michaela and always wanted kids, and when she was unable to give him kids, he now looks to Simone as the next best vessel for his seed. And Devon, the external spectator, is the voice of reason. She's the audience's POV. She almost gets wooed into this lifestyle as well once she gets a makeover from Chloe, Lisa, and Astrid. Morgan, the captain of the boat, offers to take her on a month-long trip that could potentially last longer. And here she is with the prospect of finally not being trapped home, taking care of her ailing father, finally having a life of her own. But she also sees the person that Simone has become when she entered this world. She sees how she completely lost who she was in the process, and refusing to see the same happen to herself, she actively chooses, finally, out of her own volition, chooses to go back home and take care of their father, because after everything she's witnessed and after seeing how this war of power and class changes people and often shifts the guilt to the wrong person, she chooses peace, a more modest life, but at least she'll be doing something of service. And she's okay with that. So she goes back home with her father. And that's how Sirens, I think, really expertly explores the trope of vilification of women. And I think that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this video, make sure to leave it a like down below. Subscribe to my channel. Follow me on my socials. They're all linked down below. It's almost Pride Month. And you know what that means. There's about to be a lot of gay coming out of this channel. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any future uploads. It's gonna get severe up in here. And until next time, stay safe, stay sane, stay stupid, and stay stuttering. Bye, guys.